Between Worlds, Rock and Roll Dream Series Book 1 by Cassidy A. Storm. May 1993. I jumped suddenly, waking myself from a dream. My mind was fuzzy, so I looked around to see where I was at. The gray walls of St. Thomas Orphanage stared back at me. The dawn's light was just coming to reflect through the window. All the other children around me were sleeping. I was a little cold, and I pulled my blanket tighter around me. Even though it was May, the weather in Ohio was still frigid. In the dream, I saw a man. He was tall and rugged-looking, and he had the bluest eyes I've ever seen. His hair was a sun-bleached brown. This man was going to take me home with him. Although he seemed like a good-hearted man, I wasn't exactly sure that I liked the idea. The couple I thought of as my parents were unable to have a child of their own. I remembered moments of playing in the sun, being nudged over by an affectionate dog, and being rocked and sung to by a blonde woman and a fair-haired man. This bliss was shattered when a freak accident took their lives. Since I was never legally adopted, I was put in an orphanage. As far as anyone knew, I didn't have any blood relatives. I was placed in another foster home when I was 4. In this foster home, they called me Chris, short for Christmas. My full name was Christmas Angel Devito. I remember vividly the first day with this family. The nuns had taught us to give thanks before each meal, so I was dutifully doing this at the first meal I had in my new home. I hadn't gotten more than a sentence out when I felt a hard crack against my face, which knocked me to the floor. As I was ordered to get back into the chair, the man yelled that this God stuff was not something that was done in their household. Besides the angry dark-haired man called Jim and a meek woman named Polly, they also had a 6-year-old son, John. I learned that when Jim was away, life was almost normal. John sometimes was good to me and we'd play together. This wasn't something we could do in front of Jim. He would suddenly begin screaming at us, and then we would find ourselves being beaten, sometimes with fists. I would cry, but it never stopped the beating. I never needed as much sleep as other kids, but I seemed to need less now that I was living in an abusive home. They didn't like it when I got up in the middle of the morning to watch TV, so I was restricted to my room. I made up a loving family in my mind, and while the rest of the household slept, I spent happy moments with this family. Sometimes I imagined myself back with my parents, and I remembered moments with them. I was watching a cartoon with John one morning that gave me some clarity on my life. It was a story about a stork delivering a baby from another planet to Earth. Realization dawned on me that I was that baby. The cartoon ended with the error being corrected and the baby being taken to the planet where it belonged. "Come get me," I told the TV. To John, my response was funny, and he laughed. "You chose to be here. You were here to heal the planet and its people," a voice said. I scrunched up my face, trying to figure out who had said that. John's attention was on the TV. No one else was in the room. "Help me," I voiced silently in my mind. "You know what to do," the voice in my mind replied. The problem was that I didn't. It hadn't been any time at all since the couple that had loved me had died, and so I was still upset at this sudden change of my life. But crying about it wasn't tolerated by Jim and Polly. To them, I should be happy, because they were providing me with a home. There was no comfort to be found, regardless of the situation, which only confused and angered me. There was also no one else to turn to for help. Sometimes they withheld food as a punishment, even though I hadn't done anything differently than their son John had done. And he was rarely disobedient. They were cruel, negligent people, and I saw the starting traits of that in John. I knew then that I had to escape somehow, or that I would die by their hands. Looking back at this time period, it amazes me that even at that age, I had to be an adult and do what was best for me, because the adults were out of control. It was something I saw on TV that made me change the way I reacted to Jim. I was watching a show where German soldiers were beating a man to pieces. Instead of crying or pleading for mercy, the man stood there, not flinching or making a sound. He didn't seem scared of the soldiers. I realized how scared that Jim had made Polly, John, and me with his vicious behavior. I vowed never to be that scared of anyone or anything. The next time Jim was beating me, I didn't cry, and I tried not to flinch. Now the soldier hadn't stopped beating the man just because he stood his ground, and Jim didn't stop either. However, I felt stronger for not crying. After this episode, I began doing things that got me in trouble to justify the beatings. I broke windows and anything else I could, spilled my drinks, wrote on walls, and began to hit the other children I played with. Jim always beat me, and I always stood there and took it. I found that I could go to a place in my mind where I could hardly feel him hit me or feel the pain afterwards. I called it level 1. I supposed that I fared better than some abuse victims. I was never beaten unconscious, and he stopped short of anything that would send me to the emergency room. But during my stay with them, he'd broken Polly's arm, and she had to wear a cast for a while. It was the day that I attacked Jim while he was sleeping on the couch that I was taken back to the orphanage. I had just had enough of the abuse, and I picked up a hardback book and smacked him in the head with it. I couldn't stop hitting him, and it took a few moments before he was able to defend himself and hurt me back. He could justify my black and blue body to the nuns because of all the nasty things I'd done. The nuns believed that I had gone bad and didn't treat me well after that because my attitude had changed. I had only lived with this family for 4 months, but their treatment of me had already scarred me emotionally. I had trouble with the other kids after that. I didn't fit in with them anymore. I had a hard edge on me, and I couldn't seem to play calmly with them or talk nicely with them. I knew that I had once been able to play nicely, but now I couldn't remember how. The nuns fretted about what would become of me. I'd overheard them say that now no family would want me. The door to level 1 opened, and I went in and shut it behind me because I didn't know how to make my situation better. In the past, the couple that had loved me had protected me and provided me with a loving home. I didn't understand why the adults that were responsible for my well-being now weren't doing the same thing. Why did they not know how to undo what Jim and Polly had done to me? Why wasn't I lovable anymore? It was quite by accident that I found that I liked the quietness of the roof. The orphanage was a 3-story building, and there was roof access from inside the building. I found it one night and went up there. At night it was a magical place. I found that I wasn't afraid of heights, and many a time at night I walked the edge of that building. A few of the older kids had talked about spaceships, and sometimes when I was on the roof, I imagined one landing and taking me away from all this pain. I retreated to the roof one night after a very stressful day. Everyone seemed to have gotten on my last nerve that day, and I had snapped. I was put in time out, but I was still perturbed by the time night came. As I sat on the roof wondering what was to become of me, I heard a soft whirling noise. I watched a spaceship as it suddenly appeared above the roof. A soft light shone down on the roof, and a wizard materialized who was very tall and was wearing what looked like a kid's party hat. Somehow I knew they would come. "It's about time you got here. I'm ready to go home," I told him. "You have much work to do before you can go home," he informed me. I noticed that he had a magic wand in his hand. He talked about the healing I would bring to the earth during my lifetime, and that I held the energy necessary for the planetary grid. Several others held the same energy. Together we were keeping the planet in its correct orbit. While he talked or projected the words into my mind, I couldn't help but wonder how I would bring healing when I was so broken mentally and emotionally. "But I don't like it here," I protested. "I want to go home." "You have already agreed to it. There is no turning back, as it took you 25 years to prepare. You are more powerful than the humans that live on this planet. Use your power wisely and for the good. In time, your power will increase and you will understand." As I was wondering why in the world he would think that I'd agreed to this horrible life, He and the ship just disappeared, leaving me alone again. This experience did nothing to help my already bad day. One night when I was on the roof, I sat down and just let my thoughts wander. "Hey, sweetheart," I heard my mother say. I looked up, and the couple who had been my parents for the first few years of my life were standing there smiling at me. I stood up in awe, and my dad picked me up. "Oh, Daddy," I cried to him as I held on to him and remembered his scent. "Can you come back?" I asked. "No, sweetheart, not anymore. You're going to have a new dad soon," he said softly. My mother was leaning against him and hugging me. "Be strong, little girl," my mother told me. "Always know that we love you." "But I don't want a new dad," I protested. "I know, sweetheart, but he'll be good to you. You'll be safe there. You can trust him," she replied. I know that I cried heartbreaking tears and wouldn't let them go. And then I was waking up feeling too cold to stay there anymore since I was now alone. I went back inside the building and cried for the rest of the night. About a week later, Sister Celeste took me aside and told me that I would be going to live with my Uncle Zeke. Even as she explained to me in a serious voice how important this was for me, I already knew that it was my last chance to be part of a family. She took me into an office where a man was waiting. "This is your Uncle Zeke, your mother's brother," she said. At the time, I didn't realize that she was talking about my biological mother, as I'd never known her. As he looked me over, I noticed that he had the most amazing blue eyes I'd ever seen. He was also holding a teddy bear. "This is for you," he said as he held the teddy bear out to me. I glanced at Sister Celeste and she nodded that it was okay to take it. "Thank you," I replied sullenly as I accepted it. She had me look in the mirror so I could wash my face and comb my hair before I left the orphanage. As I stared in the mirror, I saw that Uncle Zeke's blue eyes were mine. I'd never realized my eyes were so pretty. It was then that I had the slightest feeling that my new home might work out, even if I thought that I was much too old to be given a teddy bear. When he picked me up to carry me, I looked at Sister Celeste to see if this was okay. She nodded at me, knowing what I was silently asking, so I allowed it. I hadn't had anyone pick me up since my parents had died. On the plane ride, Uncle Zeke seemed interested enough in me. He talked and I didn't say much. He let me take the teddy bear on the plane with us. He said the bear would be my friend. He thought I would be scared of flying in the plane, but I wasn't. I had ceased to be scared of anything since I'd seen and experienced monsters before. A plane was just a ride, like a car. At his car, he opened the door for me and tried to help me in as though I was a much younger child. I had learned that there were certain routines to get used to with adults, so I let him buckle me in and close the door behind me. I also let him pick me up and carry me whenever he decided to do so, even though I knew I was too old for that childishness. He lived on a ranch in Whitmire, South Carolina, which was a rural area. Inside the rambling white house, he showed me my room. I was taken aback when I saw a bed with pink and white sheets and bedspread and a matching white dresser and nightstand. It was somewhat like the room I'd had when I'd lived with my parents, but for some reason I didn't like it. I was really glad he hadn't expected me to sleep in a crib. "You really do like pink, huh?" I remarked to him. He laughed. "I heard that little girls like pink," he replied. "You're so silly," I told him. But then I blinked in alarm, remembered that men like to hurt me. I had just uttered a smart remark. I expected to be slapped, but he just smiled and agreed that he was silly. He took me for a ride around the pasture to look at cows, horses, and pigs. He wanted us to get out of the truck and walk along the horses, but at that moment, a nosy brown horse had his face against my window, and he was huge. I figured it was not a good time to get out of the truck. He took it in stride when I refused, and I took that as a good omen. At mealtime and every happening afterwards, I watched for his reaction so I wouldn't mess up. Even when the neighbor lady gave him some dresses for me to wear, I let him dress me in them. I didn't want to wear dresses, but if that's what it took to keep a safe atmosphere, I would do it. I wanted to do everything right. I wanted to be happy and fit in again. I was able to carry this charade for about 2 weeks. At a church picnic on that fateful Sunday, I was prodded over to a group of children to play. They teased me about my pink dress and ribbons in my hair when everyone else was wearing jeans. They called me a bastard and began pulling on my ribbons. I didn't understand at all why suddenly I didn't fit anywhere. Gone was the world where everyone loved me and wanted to play with me. Gone was the world where people accepted me. One boy splashed mud on me and then hit me with a rock. I pushed him and he fell right into the mud puddle. He came at me soaked and muddy, and we rolled on the grass swinging at each other. When his friends tried to help, I hurt them too. By the time the adults had stopped us from fighting, some of the children were crying, muddy and bruised. Uncle Zeke picked me up and put me in the truck, and then we were home. He demanded to know what happened. I just stood and glared at him. He sent me to my bedroom for the rest of the day. I wasn't sure why he didn't understand. He'd seen the way the kids had treated me. They were mean and spiteful rather than happy and fun-loving. I desperately wanted to know how to fix the situation. However, no answers were coming and no help arrived. The following day I refused to wear a dress and was very uncooperative in general. This went on for days. I knew Uncle Zeke was at the end of his patience, but I couldn't help acting so badly. He really wanted me to talk to him, but I couldn't do that either. In my short experience, adults only pretended to care about you and offered no protection from the big bad world. On one particularly rough day, he pulled me kicking and screaming out of the truck towards the feed store. As we passed by another parked truck on the pathway to the store, something poked me on top of the head. My first thought before I even knew what it was to hurt it. My fist was raised as I found myself staring into dog eyes. The dog was looking down with me with his paws hanging over the side of the truck. "Fuzzy," I said without thinking, as if I knew his name. "Bark," the dog replied. My fist came down to my side and I stood silently looking at the dog. "Pumpkin?" Zeke said in a puzzled tone, interrupting a far-off thought in my mind. I blinked in confusion, looking at him and then at the dog. He had begun calling me Pumpkin several days before, explaining that it was a term of endearment. It had seemed weird at the time, but I had been getting used to it. "Come on," he said, and I followed him wordlessly into the store. I said nothing on the way home and went straight to my room, where I immediately went to the safe place in my mind. It was hard knowing that the world and the parents that had once loved me and been happy with me were gone forever, and so was my dog. Something wet brushed against my face, waking me up. As my eyes reluctantly opened, I saw a dog that looked almost like the one in the back of the truck, except that he was a puppy. He slurped out his tongue to lick me again. Something unlocked inside of me, remembering a dog named Fuzzy, and a feeling of safety and warmth that I hadn't had in a long time. I hugged the dog tightly, crying away the pent-up hurt, frustration, and sorrow of parents that would never come back to me. Zeke appeared minutes later and lifted me and the dog onto his lap. After a while, the dog squirmed away, but he still held on to me, rocking me gently. He was singing a Bob Seger song, still the same, softly to me. Something in my mind seemed to click in place, and I suddenly felt safe and at peace. I knew this was the dad that my parents had told me about. I had a real home now. "Are you okay?" he asked as I calmed down. "Yes," I replied, "but I don't want to wear the dresses anymore, and if the kids hit me, I'll hit them back. I don't like watching Sesame Street or playing with dolls either. That's not who I am." "I didn't know that you didn't like those things," he said as he smoothed back my hair. "What about the dog?" "I used to have a dog named Fuzzy," I replied. I told him what I could remember. "He's your dog now. You can call him Fuzzy if you want to." "Yellow. I want to call him Yellow." "That's a fine name for a golden retriever." "And I want to call you Daddy," I remarked as I ventured to look at him to see what he thought about that. "I'd like that," he smiled. What I didn't know was that he had already put in motion to adopt me. From that point on, things got better between us. At night he would either read to me or play his guitar before tucking me into bed. He even allowed Yellow to sleep in bed with me. Gradually he was able to persuade me to tell him about the things that had happened to me. He was angry about the home I'd had with Jim and Polly. I was glad his angry was nothing like Jim's angry. Bedtime was a problem. I only needed about 6 hours of sleep on a good night and 5 hours any other time. Adults seemed to think that kids needed 10 hours of sleep. Daddy was putting me to bed at 8 p.m. even though I hadn't told him that I didn't need much sleep, so I would be awake at 2 a.m. Then I'd be watching TV. He took me to a doctor to see what was wrong with me. Only when the doctor told him that he couldn't find anything wrong did he allow me to stay awake until 11 or midnight. He expected I'd be cranky in the morning or get tired earlier, but that didn't happen. Most times I was waiting for him to wake up. When things weren't going well, I'd cry to Yellow. Nearly every time I tried to play with the other kids, there would be a fight with me either starting it or helping it along, and by the end of the day, I'd be crying to Yellow. Yeah, I sure didn't know how I'd become the person that no one liked. I would give anything to have gone back and undone my stay with Jim and Polly. I would have given anything to still have been a child. It was evident, though, that I'd never be that carefree, happy child again. My childhood was over. I was an adult now. Being an adult in a child's body was hard. Daddy wanted me to sit on his lap sometimes when we watched TV. Sometimes I allowed it, but other times I didn't. I suppose I did a lot of things that didn't make sense to him. One night I endured sitting on his lap as we watched a murder mystery. The TV show was supposed to be G-rated, but there were scenes with people in bed. The time period was back in the late 1800s, and the main character was a magician. There came a point when they found the magician dead. "He's not dead," I told my dad. "He's fooling everybody." Daddy pointed out reasons that he was indeed dead. I knew he was wrong, so I kept my mouth shut. By the end of the movie, it was clear that the magician was quite alive and had fooled everyone in order to escape being killed by the king. Daddy wanted to know how I'd known that. As I explained my understanding of the movie, he listened intently. I could just about feel the wheels in his head turning in disbelief. "You're not what I expected of a 5-year-old, he told me. "Is that bad?" I asked. "No, it's not bad," he assured me. "It means you're a smart little kid." He was right about me being a smart little kid, as I could read and do math at a 4th grade level. What he didn't know was that Yellow talked to me. He told me when he was hungry, when he needed to go outside, and he listened without judgment to my problems. He sometimes gave me advice. I thought Daddy would be amazed that Yellow could talk, but instead he thought I was imagining things. He thought it only odd that I could easily find things that he'd misplaced, or that I seemed to know things that I shouldn't know. I told him when certain animals on the ranch were having problems and what certain people were thinking. "And what is he thinking?" he asked about one of the ranch hands who had been feeding the cows. The ranch hand was waving at us. "That he hates the spotted heifer and that he'd really like to fuck me because I'm the cutest little girl he's ever seen. And it would be only right for a man like him to break me in," I replied. I had kind of gotten the drift of what he had thought, but not totally. I knew that fuck was a cuss word, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. I sensed what he wanted to do would hurt me, and I'd kept my distance. Yeah, I knew a monster when I saw one. I jumped as Daddy jerked so suddenly to stare at me, shock reflecting from his face. "Where? What? Why would you say that? Do you know what that means? Did he ever tell you that?" he yelped. It was the first time I'd seen Daddy angry, and my knees shook a little. No. I don't know exactly what it means, but Yellow told me to stay away from him." "You asked, Daddy. I was just answering you." He regained his composure, then stared at the ranch hand. "Yellow is a good dog. Listen to him," he finally replied. After that day, I never saw that ranch hand again. The first time that Daddy took me grocery shopping, I stopped at the doorway of the store and said, "What's this?" "Well, it's the grocery store. It's where we buy food," he said in a puzzled voice. I followed him into the store. When he'd taken me to the tractor supply store, I hadn't really had a problem with it, but now looking at the brightly lit interior with all the shelves and freezer cases, I found that I had a problem with it. "Can I go sit in a truck?" I asked him. "No, you cannot," he replied as he selected a cart and proceeded to show me the workings of a grocery store. He understood that I hadn't been in one before, but he expected it not to be a big deal. I had a meltdown, and he placed me into the cart like a baby. There was nothing I could do about it because he was bigger than I was, so I crossed my arms and glared at everyone and everything we passed. "I'm going to leave you with that policeman if you don't behave," he warned me. I looked over at the guy in the uniform standing by the service desk. "I don't care," I whined. "Good, because this is where you're going to stay until I'm done shopping," he remarked, as he lifted me out of the cart and handed me to the guy in the uniform. "Are we having problems today?" The guy smiled as he accepted me. "Put me down, I'm not a baby," I informed him as I tried to wiggle out of his grip. He sat me on the counter as he and Daddy talked about me as if I wasn't there. Then Daddy walked away to continue shopping. If that's how this situation was going to go down, I didn't care. I thought back to what the wizard had told me about using my power. A realization of what he meant hit me then. "You're such a pretty little girl. What's your name?" the guy asked me. I observed him. He was younger than Daddy and had brown eyes and short brown hair. He was wearing a tan uniform and he was smiling at me as if he liked kids. I'd never met a kid that I liked yet. "Chris," I mumbled. "That's a pretty name. How old are you, Chris?" A lady pushing a cart with a toddler in it walked by. The toddler was looking at me curiously and wondering if I would play dolls with her. I stared back, and in my mind I told her that I didn't like to play with dolls. She laughed. 5 years, 8 months, 3 days, and 7 hours old, Dan, I replied. He blinked at me in surprise. "Well, you sure are precise, and how did you know my name?" I brought my attention back to him. "You're 26 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 2 hours old. You drive a Chevy truck that's pretty cool, and you went to Huntington High School. People like you. I read your name tag, and I read you. You're an easy read," I informed him. He was speechless then. "Only my name is on my name tag, and you're surely not old enough to read yet. How do you know all that? Did your dad tell you?" he finally asked. I was observing the activity around me. We were close to the pharmacy, and several people were waiting for prescriptions. One of them would die in a few days. There was nothing I could do to help them, as it was predestined. One person had a candy bar that he'd slipped into his jacket pocket when no one was watching. I know a lot of things, like that guy over there just stole a candy bar. It's in his jacket pocket. He steals something every time he comes in here. He can't help himself. He's a klepto. Dan eyed the guy and then looked back at me. "What kind of candy bar? Did you see him take it?" "Snickers, the kind with the yucky nuts in them, and no." Dan was telling me that I couldn't just tell stories and accuse people of things I didn't see. The guy was about to walk past us then. "Hey, did you get your prescription?" I called to him. He stopped walking and looked puzzled. "Yeah? Why?" "I was just wondering if you paid for that Snickers bar that you put in your coat pocket." "Chris, what did I—" Dan scolded me, but he didn't get to finish the sentence because the guy was now running out of the store and Dan was running after him. Yeah, I'd warned him. I watched the commotion, then I just observed people and heard their thoughts as I waited for Daddy to finish shopping. No one seemed to care about the 5-year, 8-month, 3-day, and 7-hour-old innocent little girl sitting there on the service counter desk. "Where's Dan?" Daddy asked as he approached with his cart. "He had shit to take care of. Some guy stole something," I told him. Daddy reprimanded me for cussing. Then he scooped me up and put me back into the cart. I huffed about that, and he ignored me as he finished the grocery shopping. Later that day, Dan told Daddy everything that had gone down while he was babysitting me. I was interrogated and told not to tell people things that I shouldn't know. From that day on, I was never left alone with anyone for fear of what I might tell them. I had to endure grocery shopping whether I liked it or not. But most times, Daddy just dropped me off to visit with Nancy, the neighbor lady, while he went shopping. Yeah, it was better that way. He never found out that the charade that went down on the grocery store was my solution to avoid going there with him in the future. I'd been living with Daddy for a few months and had formally been adopted when part of the fence on the east side of the ranch needed to be fixed. We'd gotten into his truck and driven over there with our tools and extra fencing. He had me handing him tools and doing little things to help him. Mostly he was probably just keeping an eye on me, although I felt old enough at 5 years old to stay in the house by myself. Part of the time I sat on the tailgate of his truck and watched Yellow chasing after rabbits or whatever interested him. We'd maybe been out about 20 minutes when Yellow started barking and looking past the truck. Dad and I looked up too because normally there was something to see when Yellow barked. I stood staring at a spaceship that was about the size of an 18-wheeler that was hovering about 20 foot off the ground. It slowly landed. "What in the tarnation is that fool dog barking at?" Daddy remarked in irritation. "Do you not see it?" I asked him. "See what?" he asked as he looked over. "The spaceship." He laughed. "Bear cub, you have such an imagination," he said. He seemed to have fun picking out cute names for me. "Could you hand me a hammer?" I guessed that I would let him call me the names. I reached into the toolbox and then walked the hammer over to him. As he worked, I looked back at the spaceship that was sitting there. I walked up to it, and then I was inside. It was really cool. It looked a lot like an instrument panel that was in a plane that I'd seen in a movie. I smiled as a guy turned from the instrument panel to look at me. "Hi, Speed," I said shyly to him. "Love the Mach 5. He was Speed Racer from the cartoon, although he was a real person, not a cartoon. He was wearing his helmet with the red M on it, white jeans, a blue polo shirt, a solid red bandana around his neck, and brown driving gloves. I had to admit that I had the biggest crush on him. And who wouldn't? He was my kind of man. "How about I let you drive the Mach 5? He asked with a twinkle in his blue eyes. "I don't know how to drive," I told him. My heart was flipping over those blue eyes and his dark hair. He said it was easy as he led me down the hall into another room. And there, in all its magnificence, was the fabulous Mach 5. "Oh my God, it's so beautiful!" I exclaimed as I rushed over to feel the race car's white interior. It was so shiny and smooth and had the huge red M on the hood. Okay, so even at 5 years old, I knew it wasn't real. I knew the aliens were trying to make me more comfortable. They were so silly, but I was going to go along with their game. They did have good taste in getting Speed to talk to me. Speed laughed and told me to get into the driver's seat. I even liked the sound of his laughter. He told me how to start up the Mach 5 and how to drive. When I turned the key, the car roared to life, and it was awesome. The sound of that engine made my whole day. "Let's go," he told me. As I put the car in first gear, it was like the room became a scene and I was on the road. As I drove and Speed instructed me on driving, we also talked about other things. "Do you know why you're here on this earth?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied as I drove past a lush field with beautiful tall sunflowers that I hadn't remembered ever seeing before. It dawned on me that I loved sunflowers. The Mach 5 didn't have a roof, and I felt the warm wind rush by, and I could smell the fragrant flowers. I wasn't driving very fast since it was my first driving lesson. "It's my punishment for some past life when I was a hellraiser, and apparently I was pretty fucking bad," I told him. "No, you're here to help people," he told me. "We'll help you through it. You have to take the initiative, though." "How am I supposed to help people? They all hate me," I replied rather angrily as I rounded a corner rather quickly and squealed the tires. The dirt kicked up as one wheel ran off the road. I righted the steering, and the car had 4 wheels on the asphalt again. Don't take things personally. Just because something happens or if someone's angry, it doesn't automatically mean that it's your fault. Most times people are going through some event that makes them lash out or treat others unjustly. That's not your fault. You should just try and understand. As long as there's an interaction between you and another person, then you're helping them, he explained. I braked suddenly as we were back inside the room in the spaceship. I took that to mean the ride was over, and I shut off that awesome-sounding beast of a machine. I looked over at him. He was wearing those brown gloves that he always wore in the cartoon. He noticed me staring at his hands, and he pulled off the gloves. He offered me his hand, and as I took it, I felt the warmth of a human. "I'm always with you," he said. In that moment, I knew everything. I noticed a small metal M on a chain hanging from the mirror. I clasped the M with my left hand. I heard the far-off voice of my dad calling me. "Try not to let this world turn your heart to stone. These are just spiritual lessons," Speed's voice drifted off. I was about to ask him what he meant, but suddenly I was standing in front of the truck and the spaceship was gone. Damn, I wanted to talk to Speed some more. He hadn't told me half of what I needed to know to survive here. And hell, I wanted to drive the Mach 5 again, even if it wasn't real. Worst of all, everything that I had known for that one moment was now gone. "Where have you been?" Daddy asked me. "On a spaceship," I replied seriously. He rolled his eyes at me in frustration. "Be serious, huh? We have to finish this fence before it gets dark." He had already started walking back to the fence. My heart sank a bit, realizing that Daddy would never believe something he hadn't seen. All those things I knew and could do, he would never believe. I totally understood to my dismay that as much as he might love me and care for me, he would never completely accept who I really was. I would probably have to lie to him when he couldn't take the truth. I watched him walk away, then I turned my fist over and opened it to reveal the metal M from the Mach 5. I smiled and put it in my pocket. It was still decently light outside when he finished fixing the fence. "I want to drive," I told him. We were in the field. What could I hit? "5-year-olds don't drive," he replied. "Maybe I could try?" He gave me a curious look. "If you think you can reach the pedals, have at it," he finally said. I slid into the driver's seat and had to sit on the very edge of the seat to reach the pedals, even after Daddy put the seat all the way up. I realized that the Mach 5 had fit me much better. Those aliens had thought of everything. I pushed in the clutch and turned the key as Speed had shown me. I smiled at Daddy when the truck roared to life. Now he looked amazed. It looked like he was going to say something, but then he just smiled. I shifted into first gear and worked the gas and brake as I had in the Mach 5, and the truck bucked forward, then smoothed out, so I shifted into second. We crept to the house in second gear. As we neared the driveway, he told me to stop. I forgot to push in the clutch and it stalled. "Brake," he remarked urgently. I hit the brake rather hard, and the truck stopped on the dime, jerking us forward. "Handbrake," he instructed, but he had to find it. I didn't know anything about a handbrake. "Why do you know how to drive?" he asked me. He seemed to be in awe of me, and I was very proud. "Speed Racer taught me on the Mach 5 a little while ago," I replied. Daddy's face took on a confused look. "Speed Racer? The cartoon?" "Yeah, he was on the spaceship." He thought about that for a moment. "You know that sounds crazy, right, Pumpkin?" he said. I liked that he talked to me like an adult. "That's only because you're human, Dad," I replied as I shrugged my shoulders and got out of the truck. Daddy was especially fond of an older couple that lived down the road from us. Bob was his best friend, and Nancy was Bob's wife. I heard him talking on the phone a while later with Bob. He said he didn't know whether to take me to see a shrink or if it was normal for a child to imagine things. He was interested that I could drive, though, and he wanted to see the Mach 5. I smiled as I twisted the metal M on its chain and hoped that Speed would visit me again soon. When Daddy came to my room to tuck me in that night, I told him that I needed for all the pink stuff in the room to be gone. Instead, I needed to see Speed Racer. We ended up compromising, and I allowed the pink curtains and pink comforter to stay, but Nancy found some sheets with Batman on them since she couldn't find any with Speed Racer on them. I was okay with that, especially since he had wanted me to have some sort of girly
theme sheets instead. I didn't know how anyone could sleep on girly sheets. I was thinking the babies would have cried all night over them.